Hi, this is Stan. Welcome back to the channel. We've got an exciting slot car topic today, International Race of Champions. Stay with us. Well, I'm excited to be here with Dave Dubel, who is the founder of our Arizona Garage Racing Slot Car Club. He's a cool guy, and he's forgotten more than I'll ever know about real racing, and as well as slot cars. And we have an interesting topic today, and that is IROC racing and how it could apply to your club. If you haven't considered IROC racing, we really think it's a cool format. And so I want you to meet Dave and see how he has managed this as a really interesting set of classes for our club. Well, Dave, thanks so much for having us over to the shop. And this is normally, we're sitting where part of the Vortex track is set up, but Dave has a modular track to where he can have part of it set up, or he can add extensions and reconfigure the shape of the track. It was custom built by Bob Scott, who's a nationally known slot car track builder. And this is one of the coolest, I'll give you a couple of shots around here. It's one of the coolest man cave garage setups that you'll ever see for racing. So, Dave, thanks so much for being willing to have us invade your space here, but we've got some cars set up, and let's talk for a second about IROC racing. Why is that such a unique format, or historically been a unique format?
Initially, it was the International Race of Champions. Different racing series decided they wanted to have the greatest of all time racers and had a competition for that was outside of the normal racing format. And so it started out, what I remember, was a bunch of Camaros equally prepared. And
This is back in the 70s, right?
I think it even may have been back in the 60s, but I don't remember exactly. But so the cars were equally prepared to the best that they could do. And various racers were brought in from various series and competed against one another. That showed some success, and so other companies and racing bodies addressed that. The reason that we do it in the club is a little bit different. We like to try to equalize the racing when we can. We'll build a bunch of cars. You can see there's several of them here that will be close to identical. They don't have to be exactly identical because the format comes down to one car on one lane, and then the driver takes his controller and moves from lane to lane and repositions the car on the new lane where he had ended on the previous lane.
So this IROC format is a cool way of even having a guy who's brand new to the club be able to race and compete against some of the more experienced racers, because he doesn't have to have all the skills of building the car. He simply needs a little bit of racing experience.
Yes, and so besides equalizing the racing amongst the regulars, this is also a method that we like to use when we have guests and visitors and maybe kids coming in that don't have a car and they want to play. And we like to watch and have everybody play. We don't, if you break your car and you're out, somebody will give you another car. We just keep it going. So this has been a really good method of doing that, and we've got several of the guys in the club who will help and supply cars.
Well, let's take a look at some of these, and you can kind of talk us through that.
Okay, let's start off with the 1/24th scale cars, because our club races both 1/24th and 1/32nd. A couple of classes that are new to the group within the last couple of years or so. This is a very heavy brass and steel chassis that comes from Zach up in Oregon, Washington area. They have a racing club up there where this chassis is used extensively for not only 4-inch wheelbase, but 4.5-inch wheelbase, and they've got variations of it that they run. This is the original type of car that we built with our first order of chassis from those guys, using a Caveman Bodies GTP type and full-size tires from 1/24th NASCARs and a pretty good size motor, 25K motor. The second group is a similar thing, but it's more of a small tire class, and it is maybe a little bit faster motor. We just recently had our first race with this type of car, and it proved to be one of the most fun races of the evening. In this class, each of us will build one car, and then when we get to a race where we've got someone who doesn't have a car, we put them out in IROC format for everybody to use. So moving on from those over to and we got to give credit here to the Robert Taylor Indy cars. A gentleman who is very experienced with stock cars, a few years decided he was going to take some of these old 80s, 90s IndyCar models and adapt them to an H&R chassis by cutting the pans and reshaping it a little bit and making an IndyCar class. Well, I saw that on Facebook and I just thought it was great. I got a hold of Robert and bought one of his cars and got his blessing on building a bunch of our own. And off we went and we started doing it here. And these are 3 of the cars. There are about 3 more out there with other guys. Stan, whose channel this is, built this car.
These were a fun build too, because the H&R chassis is kind of an old standard, really flexible chassis. You can build it any way you want, really.
Yeah, and it's like a universal chassis that is made to adapt to model cars, whatever type you want. And so we have a blast with them, and they're fast, and they're open wheel cars. So when you get together in the turns, cars go flying.
Strange things happen when those tires touch.
That's right. The universe changes a little bit. So let's see. Let's go on down the line. Stan got down to these NASCARs.
Okay.
Moving down to 1/32nd scale. This is the original set of cars that I built as an IROC series. Using 3D printed chassis, what I wanted to do with this was to take various brands of NASCAR type slot cars from the various manufacturers, Scale Electrics and SCX and Carrera.
Of course, out of the box, all those would be very different in terms of operating capabilities.
Absolutely different. And so they're sold as toys, not necessarily as race cars. And, that's the manufacturer's focus. They're in that business. And so I just wanted to level the field a little bit and see what the 3D printed chassis industry had to offer. And we were able to use equal size motors, equal gears, equal chassis, and bring them all in to where they would be competitive with one another in a race. We've recently just taken the motor size from a 21.5 thousand RPM motor down to 18,000 RPM motor to smooth them out a little bit and make them a little bit more enjoyable on the smaller tracks in the club. And Friday night at Stan's, we're going to test that. Our next group are Scale Electric's Daytona prototype models. These are 2 of the 3 paint jobs that they came with. The other one, the gold one's just too pretty to race. These are pretty much stock. We throw slip-on silicones on the rear wheels, add a little weight to it, of course take all the magnets out. We don't race with magnets here. We add a deep guide for the wooden tracks that we race on, something that will help keep the car in the slot. Likewise, the cars right behind those are equal NSR sports cars. kind of a Can-Am type, but in Europe they call this series something different. These guys are rocket ships, and half the time they're totally out of control. Once again, we put weight in them, we put silicones on the back, we make sure that we have the NSR deep guide in them. We do our best to try to keep the mirrors and the roll bars on them.
And we always have a little bag handy for all the snappy, breaky-offy parts.
That's true. Glue them on later. That's why glue was invented. And then the one last group of cars are the slotted GTP Group C type cars. They're an old favorite. A lot of cars have been with us for many, many years. This car was custom painted by Chris Kuba, one of the racers who's moved up to the Northwest, but wanted to leave us the car that had the Arizona Garage Racing motif on it, the Arizona flag. These cars are pretty much equally prepared. They have 21.5 thousand RPM motors in them and silicones on the back, weight in them instead of magnets. Not the easiest to drive, but they're pretty good for a beginner to start working his way up into a higher class. And so we use them quite often. You know, we've looked at some of the different classes of both scales of cars, but these are just the cars that I have and I take care of. You know, there's a few more of these Indy cars out there, there's a few more of these out there, but then something else that happens in our racing that isn't a prepared group will spring up. Say we'll be having a race with 1/24th Trans Am cars, and you know, 4 of us own them and 3 other guys show up. We don't let that stop us. What we do is we take these things and we put them out on the track for everybody to race. And if one breaks or something and you know, we're down a car, once again somebody will go over to their box and pick up a car and bring it out for everybody to play with. So another part of this good group of friends that has come into play on this sort of thing, and I think it's helped us get a couple of new members. So,
well, Dave, we're just about out of time for this week's program, but I thought it would be kind of cool to step in the time machine, go forward in time. Now we're over at the Lakeside track, at my track. It's a few days after we did our original taping, and we had a race tonight where we featured this special class of NASCARs that you put together, where we can race cars from completely different manufacturers, and yet we can all compete in a race, whether IROC or whether we can loan some of the cars out. But I just wanted to mention to folks that when we do race in our club, a single race is comprised of running a 3-minute heat where each driver has to run all 3 lanes. So on our tracks, we don't even have to make any accommodation for the length of each lane because every driver races every lane. And of course, on IROC that we're talking about on this video, on the IROC race, everybody races the same car on the same lane. You know, the one car stays on the red lane, another will stay on the white lane, another car will stay on the blue lane if we do the IROC format. Well, I'm going to leave it there for this week. We're going to be back on another episode. I don't know if it'll be exactly next week or not, but Dave and I are going to come back and we are going to talk about a brand new IROC series that he's building from the ground up. We're going to have an entire table full of parts, and we're going to show you in detail all of the various and sundry parts that go into building from a ground up a custom car that we can use for IROC racing. Totally different than just yanking something out of a box, or this is kind of in between where we're doing a lot of custom work on the car, but still we've got some out of the box equipment. Thanks so much for watching. It's really awesome that you could join us, and I hope if you've never raced slot cars that you found it interesting. We'll see you right here next time.